Hello, everyone. This is Ike's Political Minute, and today I will be simulating a potential 2024 presidential matchup between President Biden and Glenn Youngkin. And this really is fascinating because, other than Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis and Governor Youngkin really are the two most likely candidates to challenge President Biden in 2024. And if you'll remember, Donald Trump actually specifically mocked both Ron DeSantis and Glenn Youngkin right after the 2022 midterms. So, yeah. And also, a lot of other YouTubers have made videos with Ron DeSantis versus Joe Biden, and believe me, I'll do that in the future. But no one has apparently done Glenn Youngkin versus President Biden. So I would like to simulate that today. And I'm going to start out by filling out all the states that I believe are safe for President Biden. Yes, I think that certainly he would sweep the West Coast along with Hawaii. He would take Illinois, as well as Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, all of the states in the Northeast corridor, and Maine's first congressional district. Actually, though, I think that Colorado would be likely because Glenn Youngkin really does have that suburban appeal, and sure, John O'Day lost by about 13 points to Michael Bennett in Colorado, but what we need to understand is that John O'Day completely rebuked Donald Trump. It wasn't just that he was a moderate, and he's not like Cory Gardner where he ran with a Trump endorsement. So that's why I think Colorado would be more in the likely column because Glenn Youngkin has that suburbanite appeal, but the Trump base is also ready to turn out, and that's why I also think that Pennsylvania would go a little more in Glenn Youngkin's favor than it otherwise would for other Republicans. And Virginia, I'm going to put that in the lean column. I mean, what we need to understand is that Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points. That was enormous. And sure, Glenn Youngkin won Virginia by 2 points when Ralph Northam won it by 9 points the previous gubernatorial election, but Virginia has really slipped out of the GOP's hands, and I just don't think that Youngkin can really overcome Virginia's geography. And now I'm going to fill out all the states that I believe will be safe for Glenn Youngkin. Certainly, I think he would win the Mountain West states like Montana. I think that will go from John Tester to Republican hands. Nebraska at large for sure. And Texas, I mean, even though that state has moved out of the Democrats' reach largely because Hispanic communities in the Rio Grande Valley have moved decisively against the Democrats, Beto O'Rourke still kept it within 15 points, and he was relatively unpopular, so I think that Texas would still be in the likely column for Republicans instead of safe. And I think that Glenn Youngkin, given his being from Virginia and just generally being popular with his constituency, I think he would easily sweep the South. And for that reason, I would actually put Florida in the likely column, given how well Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio have done, and generally Florida's geography lately. I think that Florida would be a slam dunk for Glenn Youngkin. And actually, for that same reason, I think that both Georgia and North Carolina would go to Glenn Youngkin by lean margins, because Glenn Youngkin does exceptionally well with suburban voters. He does exceptionally well with getting out that special kind of coalition, which not only votes for the Trump base, but also votes for suburban initiatives when they feel that their values are threatened. In fact, that's what he said back when he was coming out to help the Northern Virginia voters. He said that he had given them a quote, permission slip to vote Republican in that specific case, even if that hadn't been the case before. Like, I don't care whether it's in Gwinnett or Cobb County in Georgia or Mecklenburg County in North Carolina. I think that Glenn Youngkin really can work that magic there. And for that same reason, I think that Pennsylvania will actually be won by Glenn Youngkin by a lean margin. Now, I get that Mehmet Oz was thought that he could do well because he was an outsider and he would do well in the suburbs, and he really did implode in the rural areas. However, I think that Glenn Youngkin could actually get the Pat Toomey coalition. I think that he would do really well in Bucks County or Chester County, but he would also do well in the rural areas because the rural areas in Virginia during his gubernatorial election turned out very strongly for Youngkin in a way that was almost 80-20 in some of those counties really close to areas like West Virginia. And I think that that really could happen on a presidential level in rural areas across Pennsylvania so he wouldn't implode like Oz would. And for that same reason, because of his northeastern appeal, because of his suburban appeal, I also think that Youngkin would win New Hampshire pretty decisively. And with that, I will also go to the state of Maine. Now, certainly, demographic trends have been working against the Democrats in Maine, but that being said, Janet Mills still won pretty decisively as governor, so I think Maine at large would still go by a lean margin in Maine's first district by a safe margin. That being said, I think Glenn Youngkin, given the Trump rural appeal and given just how much it's moved away from the Democrats, he would win pretty decisively in Maine's second congressional districts. Jared Golden is a unique phenomenon, and with the strong suburbs in Ohio going out for the Republicans and locking down the rural areas, I think that Youngkin should be able to lock down Ohio with, I wouldn't say a safe margin, actually, likely. I mean, Tim Ryan kept it pretty close, but yeah, the Democrats just are not going to make it. Iowa, however, I do think will be safe. I mean, just the way the Democrats have betrayed Iowa with changing their primary schedule to put Iowa back, and just in general, how Iowa has moved to the way of other rural states, I think that Iowa really is going to be out of the reach for the Democratic Party. And in Nebraska's second congressional district, I think that Joe Biden will actually narrowly carry it by a tilt margin. It will be very close, though, because look, I understand that Glenn Youngkin does much better with suburban voters and that the second district has been carved slightly better for the Republicans, but Joe Biden won it by 6 points. So I think that both of those things will contribute to it being a much narrower margin for Joe Biden, but I think that by the thinnest of margins, Joe Biden will still carry it out. And Michigan, I understand that the suburbs around Grand Rapids really are what have contributed to the Democrats doing well in Michigan, as well as strength in Oakland County or Ann Arbor, and slightly cutting their losses in places like Macomb County. And that, along with the Democrats having that trifecta with regaining both houses of the Michigan state legislature for the first time since 2022, I think that will make it so that Michigan is narrowly won by Joe Biden by a lean margin. Just Tudor Dixon really didn't do that well in Michigan when it was expected that she would. And I think that Glenn Youngkin would do much better because he actually admits that the 2020 election was won legitimately. But I don't think that that's going to overcome just the Democratic powerhouse that Michigan has become in this latest election. Wisconsin, though, I think that will narrowly be won by Glenn Youngkin because what we have to understand is that Ron Johnson vastly overcame Tim Michaels in the election, even though he only beat Mandela Barnes by around 1 point. And even though Wisconsin did move away from the Republicans in 2022, and it was a huge disappointment for them in general, the suburbs in places like Waukesha County are so much more favorable to the Republicans than they are in maybe other states like Virginia and Colorado. And I think Glenn Youngkin's appeal really can do well there. Minnesota, however, I think that will be won by President Biden. I mean, we had a moderate suburban Republican, Scott Jensen, run in Minnesota, and he didn't do the best. And I think that for that reason, and also just how well Joe Biden did in Minnesota in 2020, he won it by 6 points. That would be enough to keep it in the lean column. The same thing with New Mexico. I think that New Mexico has moved decisively away from the Republicans. Joe Biden won it pretty decisively in 2020, and it's not coming back for them anytime soon. I do think that Glenn Youngkin can win Arizona, and he can win it by a lean margin. We saw that both with Blake Masters and Kerry Lake. Both of them lost because they were much more extreme than I think what most Arizonans wanted, and the Democrats were able to win as much more moderate candidates. And with Carrie Lake, it was actually surprised that she lost. She was pulling 3 or 4 points ahead in the polls, and I think that Glenn Youngkin, with his much more moderate suburban appeal, he can definitely do better in the East Phoenix suburbs and win. And finally, with Nevada, I think that Glenn Youngkin will win Nevada by a tilt margin. It will be very narrow, though, because we saw the same dynamic where Adam Laxalt was a little too extreme. He was part of the main panel to overturn the 2020 election, and that really did come back to hurt him against Catherine Cortez Masto. He lost by zero point 0.8 percentage points to her, while Joe Lombardo, who ran much more as a generic Republican, won. So I think that Nevada will narrowly go to Glenn Youngkin. However, it will be close, and Nevada has come to be a very competitive swing state, plus it has been trending right in recent elections. So that is my final election map, with Glenn Youngkin beating Joe Biden 301 to 237. Thank you all for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.